Good evening. Tonight's class is dedicated by our dear friends David and Ida Schattenstein in the loving memory of a young soul, Alta Shula Swerdlov, the daughter of Rabbi Yossi and Hindel Swerdlov from Jerusalem. It's also dedicated in honor of their newborn daughter, born last Tuesday night and named Yeta Alta Shula, being called Aliyah Schattenstein. May you enjoy many, many years with Aliyah amongst abundant health, happiness, prosperity, much nachas materially and spiritually, and tonight's learning is dedicated in her honor. Mazel tov, mazel tov. The Schattensteins also dedicate tonight's class, Lahavdil ben Chaim lechaye hachayim, in the loving memory and inspiring memory of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Reb Zalman Yudah Deitch, who passed away at the age of 34 this past Shabbos, the 6th day of Kislev 5771. And at the conclusion of tonight's class, I will dedicate a few moments to share some thoughts about Levi, who was a very close and personal friend. Tehei nishmasei tzrura b'tzrer hachayim. After 20 years of spending in the house of his father-in-law, Laban, difficult time, a painful time, finally our patriarch, Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, is ready to return home to the Holy Land, to the city of Be'er Sheva, where his father Yitzchak, his father Isaac, lives. 20 years earlier, Jacob fled the Holy Land because of the wrath of his brother Esau and the fear of his brother's sword. So he went and he traveled to Mesopotamia, to Haran, where he gets married, he builds a family, and he works as a shepherd for his father-in-law. And now, after 2 decades, he's ready to return. And as he embarks on his journey back to Eretz Yisrael, back to the Holy Land, he does something. And that's the opening of the portion of Vayishlach. Please open up your curriculums right below the video. There's a PDF document with your curriculum. Open it up to source number 1. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefonav aleisavachiv artzaseyers deyedum. Jacob sends emissaries, angels, to Esau, his brother, living in the land of Seir in the field of Edom. Vayitzav osam lemer. Edom is on the southeast of the land of Israel. Vayitzav osam lemer, and he commands the messengers, saying, Kaisamrun la adoini li Esau. This is what you should share with my master Esau. Kayamar avdecha Yaakov, this is what your servant Jacob has said. Im lavan garti ve'echer adot, I was living with Laban, and I delayed till now my return. Vayili shevach amar tzair ve'eved v'shivcha. I acquired a bull and a donkey, flock, maid, servants, ve'eshlecha la'agid la'adoini limtzeichein beinecha, and I'm sending this message to my master Esau in order to find favor in your eyes. And the narrative continues about how the messengers go and they meet Esau and they return and they tell Jacob, Esau is coming against you with 400 men, and he prepares for war and he prays and he prepares a lavish gift which he sends to his brother Esau, and finally they meet, and lo and behold, the meeting takes place with much love and camaraderie and peace. They kiss and embrace each other and weep on each other's shoulders. But what I want to discuss tonight is the divergent perspectives of our sages when they analyzed this moment, when Jacob feels the need to send messengers to his brother Esau. At first glance, we find a major contradiction in the attitude of our sages and our rabbis throughout history to the behavior displayed here at this moment by Jacob. How did they view this concept? Seems contradictory, and this is what we want to explore this evening. Take the next source, the Midrash Rabbi, Bereshis Rabbi, Perek Ayin Hey. Zok the Midrash, listen, let's look inside. Vayishlach Yaakov, Jacob sent messengers. Reb Huna Pasach, Rabbi Huna, the great Talmudic Babylonian sage, when he discussed this verse, he opened it up with a verse from Proverbs, from Mishlei chapter 26, where the writer says, Machzik biyazne kelev oiver misabed al riv loy loy. Somebody who holds on to the ear of an angry dog is getting involved in a fight that does not belong to him. Meaning, if you start up with an angry dog, you are guilty for being bitten. Who asked you to go pull the ear of a dog who's having a bad day? Shmuel bar Nachman Omer. Shmuel, the son of Nachman, explained, Mashal arki listim shayashim b'parashas drachim. There was an arch robber, a thief, who was sleeping on a crossroads. That's where his career took place, robbing people. He went to sleep. Avar chad v'shari meirle. Amalei kum lach devisha shchiach. A passerby walks by and he sees this man sleeping. He wakes him up and he says, I just want to tell you that this is a place that's dangerous. There are thieves here. He wakes up the main thief, the chief thief, and he tells him, don't sleep here. Come v'shari mekapeyach be. The man gets up and starts bothering, beating the one who woke him up. Amalei. So he tells him, Niyar Bisha, the bad man woke up. Amalei, domechave v'irartine. I was sleeping, you woke me up. You're guilty. God tells Jacob, Esau was minding his own business. He was following his own path. You're the one who enticed him. You're the one who sent him a message and called yourself his servant. You define yourself as his servant. You woke up, you enticed the robber. You woke him up from his sleep. You're my servant. Let me come attack you. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Simon Pasach, the Midrash continues. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Simon, opened up with another verse from Jeremiah 13. Ma toimri ki yifked alayich va'at limadet oisam alayich alufim l'rosh. What are you going to do when they dominate you? But you're the one who taught them that they can be masters over you. You are the one who called yourself a slave. You are the one who surrendered your identity. You are the one who let other people control you and dominate you. Now what are you going to do once they dominate you? The verse in Jeremiah says, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God tells Jacob, L'darkei haya mahalech. You're the one who sends him a message. Thus said your servant Jacob. To summarize the message of these perspectives in the Midrash, we could summarize it with the next source, that famous expression, a lovely expression, quoted in the Mincha Chadasha, Ha'isa atzmaiseh haza'ev oichle. Somebody who turns himself into a sheep invites the wolf to eat him. The wolf doesn't eat other wolves. The wolf eats a sheep. If you turn yourself into a sheep, if you become a Kafkian character and you metamorphosize yourself into a sheep, now you allow the wolf to devour you, to eat you. Only you can make yourself a sheep. Only you can make yourself a shepsela. Nobody can turn you into a sheep. Only you yourself. Another Midrash in the same section, Vayishlach, extends this idea even more emphatically. Take a look at the next source. Bereshis Rabbi in Hayud Aleph. Yaakov la'Esav Adoni. The moment Jacob called Esau my master, because in all of these verses, Jacob calls Esau Adoni, my master, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 8 times. Right in the beginning, He sends a message, my master Esau. The moment he called him my master, God tells him, you belittled yourself, you humbled yourself, and you called Esau, my master 8 times. Chayach, I swear to you. I will establish from his descendants 8 kings, 8 rulers, before your children begin to develop their blood of royalty, of aristocracy. Shenemar, as the end of Vayishlach reads, Ve'ela melochem ashamolchu be'eretz Edom lifnei meloich melech lebnei Yisrael. And here are the 8 kings who reigned in the land of Edom, southeast of Israel, which is the land of Esau, the land of Esau, before the children of Israel ever got a king. The 8 times that Jacob called him my master, indeed turned him into a master over Jacob. His 8 kings came before Jacob's descendants had their first king, which was Shaul. This is the Midrash. The Ramban. The Ramban is, of course, the 13th century great Spanish sage, physician, rabbi, leader, philosopher, debater, polemicist. In his commentary on Chumash, takes it a step further. And he uses this as a paradigm for a major event that would occur in history. Take a look at the Ramban, next source. Zok the Ramban. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim el Esav achiv artz Seir. Why did Jacob send messengers to his brother Esau in the land of Seir? Ba'avur heyois Negev Eretz Yisrael al yad Edom. Jacob was going to the Negev. He was traveling to the south of the land of Israel to Beersheba. And the south of Israel is close to the country of Edom. Va'aviv Yoshev be'eretz HaNegev, and his father Isaac lives in the Negev. So Jacob is coming to the Negev where Yitzchak lives. Yeshlei laver derech Edom ekariv misham. So Jacob knew either he's going to pass Edom or he's going to pass a place that's near Edom, because Edom is on the southeast of the land of Israel. Al kain pachad, he was afraid, Ula yishma Esau, maybe Esau will hear the news that Jacob and his entourage arrived, and trouble will begin. So Jacob anticipated the possible reaction of his older brother, and he sent messengers to Esau to notify him that he's coming and to extend a hand of peace and mutual respect and understanding. The Ramban gives us the literal interpretation of what was going through Jacob's mind. And the Ramban continues, Ukvar tafsu hachachamim alza. But the sages already tafsuhu, they chapped him on this. They were upset, so to speak. They expressed dissatisfaction with this. And the Ramban quotes the Midrashim that we learned a moment ago. And then the Ramban continues, look further. Va'al daiti, according to my opinion, the Ramban says, Nachmanides, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Nachman says, Gamze Yirmois, this is a hint for the future. Ki anachnu ischalnu nefilosenu biyad Edom. In the future of history, we too began. We are responsible for the commencement of our defeat in the hands of Edom. According to our tradition, Edom was metamorphosized and evolved into the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire has its origin in the Esau's empire in the land of Edom. So the Ramban says, what the Midrash says about Yaakov, that by calling himself a slave to Esau, he was pulling on the ear of the wild dog and therefore responsible somewhat for the wild dog biting him, for the angry dog biting him. This is a paradigm of history that the Jews would ultimately be responsible for their defeat in the hands of the Roman Edom. Because the monarchs during the Second Temple made a covenant with the Romans. And some of them arrived to Rome. And that's why they were ultimately defeated by the Romans. It's mentioned in the words of our rabbis, and it's known in books and history books. What the Ramban is referring to here is a few episodes, But first and foremost, he's referring to one particular episode that's articulated in Josephus, the famous historian Yosef ben Matisyahu, or in his Roman name Josephus Flavius, who was a Jew who ultimately went over to the Roman side during the destruction of the Second Temple and wrote down the history of the Jews during the Second Temple era, the book of the Chashmonaim and other sources. And there we have the story of the beginning of the Roman mastery over the land of Israel. Briefly, extremely briefly, many of you know the story of the Chashmonaim. The Chashmonaim revolt against the Syrian Greeks begins by a man named Matisyahu. Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Matisyahu had 5 sons. Yehuda HaMaccabee was the most famous one, but he had another 4 brothers. The last surviving son of the original Maccabee family was Shimon. Shimon, the son of Matisyahu. Shimon is succeeded by his son, who's known as Yochanan Hyrcanus, who becomes the high priest from the Chashmonaim family. He's the son of Shimon, the grandson of Matisyahu. Yochanan Hyrcanus, his son and successor, is a man named Alexander Yanai, or in the Greek name, Alexander Jannaeus. He became a Hellenist, just like his father at the end of his father's life, Yochanan at the end of his life. And Alexander Jannaeus, during his time, there was bloodshed, civil war among the Jewish people. One Sukkot, they pelt him with esrogim, and he had 6,000 Perushim Pharisees killed. I mean, his leadership was a tyranny and it was a disaster. He had a wife, a great woman, a noble woman, a special woman. Her name was Shlomtzion Hamalka. Shlomtzion the queen, and when her husband Alexander Yanai died, Shlomtzion took over for around 9 years, and it was a special time. It was a beautiful time. But when she died, she had 2 sons. Her and Alexander Yanai had 2 sons. One was Hyrcanus, and one was Aristobulus. And these 2 brothers were in a war. Who's going to take over the leadership of the Jewish people, both the high priesthood and the kingship? And Hyrcanus and Aristobulus were neck to neck with each other, which created terrible strife in the land of Israel. And in order to settle the strife, they went to Pompey. Pompey was the Roman leader, and they came to Pompey to settle the dispute between the 2 Jewish brothers. Once Pompey was brought in, he smelled the opportunity, he smelled the potential. He never left. Pompey in the year 63 before the Common Era. The temple is destroyed in the year 70 after the Common Era. But in the year 63 before the Common Era, Pompey takes over Jerusalem, he takes over the temple, he creates his own system, and once Rome was brought in by the Jews, they never left. You know, the dog and the cat are fighting and they bring in the lion to make peace, but once the lion smells the territory, he says, I'll take over for both of you. You'll both be under me. And that's what the Ramban is referring to. He's referring to later stories as well. But the point is, the moment they became the slave and they said, Rome, you will tell us what to do. We need you. We're recognizing your power. That's the moment that they defined their destiny. And ultimately Rome would never leave. And the independence of Judea would be lost. And finally Rome would not only conquer and own the land, but will destroy the Second Temple and exile the Jews, which would happen in the year 70. Some decades later after Pompey. This is what the Ramban is saying. And he shows that it's initiated in that moment when Esau is being called my master and Jacob is being called the servant. It's the Jewish acquiescence. It's the Jewish surrender. The Jews turning themselves into a sheep, which allows the wolf and gives the wolf the idea that I can eat them, I can master them, I can crush them. That's one perspective. But now let's see another perspective. In the same Midrash, same portion, Vayishlach, we see a different approach. Take a look at the next source. Bereshis Rabbi, Parsha, Ayin Hey, just like the other Midrash. Ayin Hey Hey, 75:5. A fascinating story. Jacob tells the messengers, go tell my master Esau, says the Midrash a story. Rabbeinu Omar le Rabbi Efes. Rabbeinu, our teacher. Who is this? This refers to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Judah the Prince. Rabbi Judah the Prince lived in the 2nd century after the Common Era. After the destruction of the Second Temple, he is the editor of the Mishnayos, the Mishnah, the great source of the oral tradition of Judaism, which would later develop into the Talmud. He's known as Rabbeinu, our Rebbe, our teacher. He was a very close friend with the Roman leader, Antoninus. And the Rome at that time gave the Jewish people very little independence in their homeland. And the Rebbe cultivated a very warm and gracious relationship with the Roman emperor to be able to hold on to the little independence that the Jews still had in their old homeland. Rabbeinu Amar le Rabbi Efes. Rabbi Efes was his secretary, and therefore he would write his letters for him. So Rebbe tells Rabbi Efes, Ksoiv chad igre min shmi lemaron malkan teninus. Write a letter from me to our master, the king, the Roman king Antoninus. Come. Rabbi Efes stood up, v'kosav, and he wrote a letter. Min Yehuda Nesiya lemaron malkan teninus. It was addressed from Judah the prince, Yehuda the Nasi, the leader, to the master, the king Antoninus. Nosve v'karye v'kare. Rabbi Yehuda looked at the letter, he read it, and he tore it. Omar le, he told Rabbi Efes, Ksoiv min av de chayud l'maran malkan teninus. Write in the letter from your servant Judah to the master, the king Antoninus. Don't write from Judah the prince to the master Antoninus. From your servant Yehuda. Omar le, Rebbe Efes said, Rebbe, why are you disgracing your honor? Omar le, Rebbe told him, Ma, not tavmin sabi. Am I better than my grandfather? Did my grandfather Yaakov Avinu Jacob not send a message to his brother Esau? So said your servant Jacob. If my grandfather Jacob can express himself that way, I can't express myself that way. Of course I could. And therefore change the letter. Don't say from Yehuda the prince to the master Antoninus. Say from Yehuda, your servant, to our master the king Antoninus. The 16th century great biblical commentator who lives in Italy. He's a linguist and he's a philosopher. Rabbi Evadia Sforno gives us also a commentary in Vayishlach. Take a look at the next source. When Jacob meets Esau, when they actually encounter each other, Esau runs over to him, embraces him, falls on his neck, and weeps, kisses his brother. Zokte Siparna, Nepach liboy k'moyrega b'hachna oisav shel Yaakov. As a result of the subservience of Jacob, the heart of Esau was transformed momentarily. Ka'omram zal, as our sages say, Sha'achia ashiloini kilalis Yisrael b'konna nichna l'chol aruchas. That the prophet, Achia Hashiloini, cursed the Jews that they should be a reed which surrenders to all the winds. And we will discuss in a moment what this Siporner is referring to, which statement of our sages. Hein, he continues, Hein, luasu kein biryoine bayis sheni, lahayan nechrav beis mikdashenu. If the wild zealots during the time of the Second Temple would behave like this, the second Beis Hamikdash would have never been destroyed. As Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai testified to Vespasian, and he said, the zealots among us did not let me come out. And here he's referring to a piece of history described in the 5th chapter of Talmud Tractate Gittin. During the 1st century after the Common Era, the Jewish people split up into many groups, but two I want to discuss. One group believed in outright war against Rome. Rome, of course, occupied the world, including the Middle East, including Judea. and they believed in outright war against Rome, and they did everything they can to put the Jews in a position where they had to go to war against Rome because they could not survive in the besieged Jerusalem. They revolted against Rome, and they continued their revolt and refused any attempt of negotiation and peace. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the leader of the sages, among the sages, who was the great sage of his time, believed that this was a wrong mistake. This was a bad error and a terrible strategic mistake. And he himself sneaked out of Jerusalem and he met Vespasian. And Vespasian wants to know why he hasn't come till now. And Rabbi Yochanan says, the Biryonim, the zealots, did not let me leave Jerusalem. So the Separnai says, this is what happens with Jacob. When Jacob tells Esau that he's surrendering to him, he acknowledges his uniqueness. He says, my master, I'm your servant. Jacob melts. He's happy. Esau melts. He expresses affection to Jacob. It's like the reed that sways with surrenders to all the winds. And he says, this was the mistake of those wild zealots during the Second Temple who were unwilling to compromise, who were unwilling to embark on the path of diplomacy and goodwill and express a desire to surrender to the master, to the owner. And because of that, the temple was destroyed. What is this idea with Achia Shiloini cursing the Jews to be like a reed which surrenders to all the winds? Here the Sefarna is referring to a statement in the Talmud. Take a look at the next source, Zog the Gemara, Masechta Tainis, Daf Chafam at Aleph. I know for some of you the sources may be natural. For some of you the sources may be a little complicated, but bear with us because we'll soon see how everything comes together. Zog the Gemara in Tainis Daf Chafam at Aleph, Damar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Nachmani, said in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, Mai diksiv, what is the meaning of the verse again in Proverbs? Ne'monim pitzei oyev v'ne'toros neshikai soinei. What a verse. The wounds of a friend are loyal, and the kiss of an enemy is deceitful. Which means when your best friend wounds you, chastises you, rebukes you, you know it's coming from a loyal place, cherish it. When your enemy gives you a kiss, don't cherish the kiss. In other words, sometimes the one who kisses you is not trying to kiss you, and the one who challenges you is trying to help you. Don't get confused, Proverbs says. What is the meaning? Zog the Talmud. The curse of Achia HaShiloini is superior to the blessing of Balaam. Achia HaShiloini kilalon bekona. Achia HaShiloini, who lived during the days of, well, he lived a very long time. But this story takes us to the days of King Solomon. After Solomon's death, there is a split among the Jewish nation. David was the king, a unified king. Solomon, Shlomo, was a unified king. When Shlomo died, the Jews came to his son Rechavam and they asked him to lower the taxes, to lower the burden. Rechavam got the wrong advice and he came down even harder on the subjects. And that's when the people split into two. And they appointed a new king known as Yeravam ben Nevat. And he became the king over the northern kingdom of Israel. 10 tribes went under the leadership of Yeravam, and only 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were under the leadership of Rechavam in the southern kingdom. And this split continued until the Assyrian king would exile the 10 tribes, and ultimately the 2 tribes would be exiled by Babylonia. Achia HaShiloini was the prophet of the time. He prophesied that Yeravam will become a new king, competing with Rechavam from the Davidic dynasty. Achia HaShiloini also spoke about Yeravam himself, who turned out to be a very wicked king, although he was a great scholar. And Achia HaShiloini curses and he says, Omar lahem li Yisrael, he says, V'hika Hashem es Yisrael, kasher yonud hakona. God will smite Israel as the reed sways. Just as the reed sways, the Jews will also be smitten. Zog the Gemara, Ma koneze oimed b'makem mayim, just as the reed stands in water, v'gizay machlif, its trunk falls off, but then it exchanges, a new trunk grows. V'sharash of merubin, but its roots are powerful, its roots are many, numerous. V'afilu kol haruchas shebaylam boys, v'noishvus bayin mizizos oisim im kaimai. And even if all the winds in the world come and sway the reed, they don't remove it from its place. The reed goes with the winds. The wind goes east, the reed goes east, west, north, south. The reed sways with the wind. When the winds are silent, the reed still stands in its place. It didn't resist the winds. It went exactly where the winds wanted it to go. It was swayed with the winds in all directions. And you look at the reed and you say, Nebuch, it has no identity. It has no backbone. It's not stubborn. Achia Shiloni curses the Jews, they'll be like a reed. They'll sway with the winds. But when the winds are silent, when the winds calm down, the reed is back in its place. Its trunk may fall off, but a new one grows. It may sway in all directions, but its roots are powerful and numerous, and therefore it remains. Aval Bilam Arasha Berchan Be'eres. Balaam blessed the Jews to be a cedar. Not a koneh, not a reed, but an erez, a cedar. Shenemar, he says in Balak, Karozim, like cedars. Ma erez zein yemed b'makamayim vein gizei machlif vein sharashav merubin. Just as this cedar doesn't stand necessarily in water, in a soft place, nor does its trunk fall off and a new one comes on. No, it remains solid. Nor does it have numerous roots. And even if all the winds in the world blow on it, this cedar does not budge from its place because it's powerful, it's fixed, and it's etched. But when the southern wind comes, the southern wind being the euphemism for the most powerful wind, there's one wind that's unbelievably powerful. It comes, it uproots the cedar and transforms it on its face. So Achia Shilaini curses the Jews and Balaam blesses the Jews. But he says when your beloved one curses you, it may be a blessing. And when your enemy blesses you, when your enemy kisses you, it may be a curse. Be careful. So he blesses them to be a cedar. A cedar is very strong. A cedar is very stubborn. It doesn't move. It never moves. I never change positions. I am who I am. But then one wind will come and destroy you. And the cedar is gone. Achia Shiloini. He curses the Jews. He says, you'll be a reed. The reed is not stubborn. The reed is not fixed in one place. The reed is sometimes a little shepsela. Very docile, very submissive. The wind says, go here. Woo! We go here, there. But it has a core that's under the ground, under the earth. Its roots are numerous. And when all the winds calm down, when all the dust settles, the reed is still there, unlike the cedar. This is what the Siparna is referring to when he speaks about Jacob and Esau, and when he speaks about what the zealots in the second temple didn't understand. They decided to be a cedar, and they didn't understand the value of being a reed. That sometimes the Jewish people understood, let them be like a cedar, not. Let them be, like a reed, not like a cedar. Let them go with the wind. Let them sometimes compromise. Let them negotiate. Let them be diplomatic. Let them send a gift to Esau. Let them bribe Esau. Let them not necessarily be resistant and stubborn. But ultimately, as history evolves, all the winds that try to threaten and redefine the reed are gone, like Rome, like Babylonia, like Egypt, like Assyria, like Persia, like Greece. And the reed that seemed so spineless is here. Because the reed had a core, and the core it would not give up. So now let's ask this question. Which approach is the right approach? It seems like the very same Midrashim are communicating very opposite messages. The first approach is, ho, you turned yourself into a sheep. You made sure you invited the wolf. You call him a master and yourself a slave. You become the slave and he becomes the master. You woke up the thief that was asleep. You become his victim. You woke him up. You showed him, you gave him his power, his energy. You pulled on the ear of the wild dog. You caused him to bite you. That's the first perspective in Midrash. 8 times my master, you made 8 kings for him. The second perspective, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the leader of the Jewish people, the editor of the Mishnah, says, what am I better than Yaakov? I can't call myself Avdecha. The Siparnei tells us, be a reed, don't be a cedar. Which approach is the appropriate approach? You know this is not an easy question to answer. Jewish people have been debating this question for thousands of years. Until today, the Jewish world is split about this question, both in America and of course in Israel and in other parts of the world. And within every group, there are so many denominations and philosophies and perspectives and worldviews. What was the perspective? What is the perspective of Torah? What was the perspective of the Chazal, of our sages, of our rabbis? How do we understand what they viewed, what their view was? I want to introduce another Midrash, not in Vayishlach, but in Megillas Esther, in the book of Esther. A very strange Midrash at first glance. But when we study it well, we can see in this Midrash the paradigm of Torah, which allows us to see both of these perspectives from a greater point of view, and hence the reconciliation of them. Open up the next source. This is the Midrash Rabbi in the beginning of the book of Esther on the words, Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. It happened in the days of Achashverosh, the Persian king. He was Achashverosh. He was. Seems redundant. Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh, Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh. It wasn't the days of Achashverosh. Hu Achashverosh. He was Achashverosh. You just said it was in the days of Achashverosh. Zog the Midrash, Chamisha l'ra v'chamisha l'toiva. We find 5 times who negative and 5 times the term who is positive. Chamish l'ra, 5 negative. In Bereshis we have hu haya giber tzayid, about Nimrod. He was a powerful hunter. Next, hu Esau avi Edom in Vayishlach. He is Esau, the father of the Edomite nation. Next, hu Dasan v'Aviram. This is Dasan and Aviram. Next, Hu HaMelech Achaz. He was the king Achaz, one of the Judean and very evil kings. And finally, Hu Achashverosh. He is Achashverosh. 5 who's. Nimrod, Esau, Dasan, Aviram, Achaz, and Achashverosh, the Persian king. Chamisha l'Taiva, we have 5 who's in the Bible in a very positive note. Positive, great people. Avram, Hu Avram, in the book of Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim. Avram, he was Avram. In Shmos, Hu Moshe v'Aaron, Hu Aaron and Moshe. This is Moses and Aaron, this is Aaron and Moses. In Shmuel, Samuel, David, hu Akatan, David was the small one. Hu Yechizkiyahu, the king Yechizkiyahu. And finally, hu Ezra Olam Bavel, he was Ezra, who ascended from Babylonia. Ezra was from the Jews who came back from Babylonia after the 70-year exile and rebuilt the 2nd temple in Jerusalem. We have 5 who's in the negative and 5 who's in the positive. Rabbi Brachia b'shem Rabban the Taman. Rabbi Brachia said in the name of the rabbis of the land of Israel, Islan chad de tav mikulain. We have one who which is better than all of them. And this is the who in the book of Psalms. Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol ha'aretz mishpatav. He is the Lord our God, whose justice is in the entire earth. Shemidas rachamav la'olam. That the attribute of his compassion is for eternity. What is the meaning of this Midrash? 5 times that the word who is used. Now, the word who means he. In all of these cases, the word who is a little redundant. It's a little strange. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. It's trying to tell us something special about the person. This wasn't just a man named Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. Esau is not just a man, hu Esau. This is the Esau. Hu dasan v'aviram. The who, he, is identifying something unique, something extraordinary about the person. So there's 5 in the negative and 5 in the positive. What is the meaning of it? What's the connection? Why 5? And what is the meaning of the last statement? There's one superior than all of them. Who? God. Who Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. Why? Because the attribute of His compassion is forever. What's the connection here? What is the message of this Midrash? How are we to understand this Midrashic statement? The answer to this is, briefly at least, these 5 actually parallel each other. They contrast each other in the narrative of human civilization and history. Each who has a counterpart. Zeh l'umas zeh asa Elokim, Ecclesiastes says. Everything in this world is counterbalanced, positive with negative. Every force has a counterforce. That's how it works, emotionally as well. When you have an inspiration or drive to do something, there will be a counterforce within yourself or from outside of yourself to challenge it. That is how reality and existence work. So each one of these 5s has its counterforce. So we have Abraham, Avram. Avram, who Avram? Abraham was the man, the first individual to publicize in the world that there's a God. Who was his counterpart? Nimrod. Who haya gibor tzad? Nimrod comes from the word mered, rebellion. His agenda was to rebel the world against God. So you have Abraham versus Nimrod, and they were both contemporaries. In fact, Nimrod, according to the rabbis and sages, tried to execute and kill Abraham, to kill Avram. You have Moses and Aaron, 2 brothers, versus Dasan and Aviram, 2 brothers. Moses and Aaron are the 2 brothers, the paradigm of unity and redemption. Dasan and Aviram are the 2 brothers, the paradigm of quarrel, disputation, and an exile mentality. And throughout the journey of the Jewish people through the desert, Moses and Aaron and Dasan and Aviram will always be competing with each other. 2 brothers against 2 brothers, how brothers should be. And then you have David versus Esau. Esau is the father of Edom, which will bring out the 8 kings, as we discussed before. 8 kings that Edom would produce, descendants of Esau. David would be the 2nd Jewish king, but the kingships would be opposite. The kingship of David would be to saturate the world with Malchus Shamayim, with the royalty of God, and the royalty of Esau, Avi Edom, would have the exact opposite intention. The 2 kings, Achaz and Chizkiyahu. Achaz, Lama Nikra Shmai Achaz, the Talmud says, why is he called Achaz? Achaz v'batei knesiyos v'batei midrashos. He held on, he closed off all the Torah centers, all the synagogues. Chizkiyahu, the Talmud says in his day, you could look in the sources, they looked Midan v'ad Beersheva, and there was no child who did not know even the laws of ritual purity and impurity, which are the most complicated laws in Judaism. Achaz and Chizkiyahu, 2 kings of Judea, completely on the opposite spectrums. And finally you have Achashverosh and you have Ezra. Achashverosh was the one who held up the rebuilding of the Second Temple, the Persian emperor, and Ezra was the one who rebuilt the Second Temple. That's the who's. Each one was very prominent, was very powerful, and they counteracted each other. Comes the Midrash and says, but one is superior than all of them. What is that? Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. He is God, our Lord. His justice is in the entire earth. Who is this Hu Hashem Elokeinu? He is better than all of them, than this 5 and the other 5. Each one of these 5 lived in his generation, in his time, in his milieu, in his era, and he had his competition. Nimrod, Avraham, Moshe, Aaron, Dasan, and Aviram, Achaz, Chizkiyahu. Either in that generation or in a later generation, each one had their time and they had their competition. There is one who, the Midrash says, the Tav Mikulhan. It's better than all of them. What do we mean it's better than all of them? I understand it's better than the 5 negative ones. What does it mean it's better than the 5 positive ones? What it means that it's better from the 5 positive ones, we have the Hu Hashem Elokeinu that's superior to all of them. You might think that negativity, that evil, has a real, tangible reality, and it has an eternal reality. Comes the Midrash and says there's one more Hu, and that's the Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav, the Hu of the presence of the living God who pervades all of history and pervades all of civilization from the beginning of time until the end of time. So through Avraham and Nimrod and through David and Esau and through Dasan and Aviram and Moshe and Aaron and through Achaz and Chizkiah and through Achashverosh and Ezra, with all the ups and the downs and the roller coaster of history and the balance and the counterbalance and the good and the evil and the light and the darkness, and the blessings and the tribulations and the triumphs and the challenges, and going up and going completely down, scaling up the highest mountains and reaching into the lowest abyss and lowest depths. There's one Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. There's the Hu of God, whose justice pervades the whole earth. And as the Midrash says, Shemidas rachamav la'olam, whose attribute of compassion is eternal, which what the Midrash is saying here is, don't think that there is a competing reality. Ultimately, there's good and there's evil, and they're always fighting with each other, and each one has its power and each one has its momentum. But evil has equal power to good? No. Ultimately, there's the Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. The only true existence, the only true presence, the only true reality is the godliness of the world. Because godliness is what gives energy and vitality and substance to every single creature and to every single existence. And therefore, even the existence of Nimrod and of Esau and of Dasan and Aviram and of Achaz and of Achashverosh, although at the surface and in reality they're expressing a life philosophy and a behavior which is completely antithetical to goodness, to morality, to holiness, and to kindness, but ultimately they themselves too are receiving nurture from their godly source and energy, because there's nothing outside of the Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. Ultimately, the world is God's world. It's a divine world. It's a divine existence. So therefore, everything is a manifestation of the divine. Everything is an expression of the divine. It's true, God allowed there to be counter forces in the world to allow for free choice, to allow for human creativity, and to allow for the system of existence the way He orchestrated in His mind, and it's beyond ours completely. And we often have little comprehension in it. But the Midrash says, remember that there's one Hu that's better than all the Hus. It transcends and it encompasses all the other Hus. And that's the eternity of Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav, that there's only one authority in the world. And there's only one source in the world. And there's only one truth in the world. Because no one can have any life force. And nobody can have any existence. And no one can have any vitality and any consciousness if the divine source was not infusing it with the engine of life and the ability to function every single moment. So at the end of the day, at the end of history, there's no real competition between good and evil where both of them have equal forces. There's only one truth in the world. And the ultimate purpose of evil is to serve as a challenge, to bring out the power of good. In other words, the evil is there for it to be vanquished. It doesn't have an independent, true substance. It doesn't have an independent, true reality. Its reality is there only to reveal godliness in a deeper way. Its reality is there for it to be vanquished, for it to be overcome. Based on this Midrash, we will be able to understand the two aspects that our sages are conveying in the Midrash in the relationship between Jacob and Esau. On one hand, the Ramban, Nachmanides, expresses himself in this portion of Vayishlach. He says that Vayishlach is Parsha's Golus. It's the portion that teaches the Jewish people about their time in exile. In the time of exile, Parsha's Golus, in the words of the Ramban, Esau has to sometimes send a gift to Esau. He must acknowledge Esau's position, Esau's leadership, Esau's governing powers, and therefore send emissaries and send a lavish gift to please Esau. On the other hand, at that very moment he must know that Esau does not have any true and ultimate dominance in the world. So let's take the story of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and Antoninus. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, you can write from your servant Rabbi Yehuda to my master Antoninus. Why? Dina de Malchusa Dina. God gave Rome the power. I am the servant of Antoninus. There's a certain position, there's a certain authority, there's a certain leadership, and in that sense, I am the servant. And I'm not ashamed. My grandfather Yaakov said, Avdecha, I can also say Avdecha. There are times when in life we will be like a reed. Why will we be like a reed? Because we'll go with the wind here, we'll go with the wind here, because at certain points God says, now the nature of reality is structured that Esau is the ruler, Antoninus is the ruler. And therefore, since that is the nature of reality, which is my reality, so the flow that you need will come through Antoninus, and therefore you should be at peace with Antoninus, you should cultivate Antoninus, and you can call yourself the servant of Antoninus. Now the reed has to go towards this side of the wind. Because right now the who is expressed through Antoninus, through Esau, through this individual, through this government. The entire world is God's world, but God's energy is manifested and it flows through different vehicles, through different mechanisms, through different instruments, through different governments, through different empires, through different people. Now in exile it's flowing through Esau, through Rome, through Antoninus. Rebbe says, I'm not embarrassed, you can write, I'm the servant. Comes the Siparna and explains, don't engage in wars. Who asked you to engage in wars? Have a mispalel b'shlomo shel malchus as long as you can. Try to pray for the welfare of your government and work with it and through it. Because this is how God's energy is flowing now in the time of exile. But the moment the Jew starts believing that Esau is his real master, that Esau is the true power of the world, that he must surrender himself internally to Esau, because that's the way he will be successful, then he completely got it wrong. If you can understand that the who of Esau is an expression of who Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav shemidas racham of li'olam, part of your relationship with God, the master of the world, demands that you work through Esau. Good. The moment you become a true servant of Esau, where you feel inferior to Esau, where you experience an inferiority complex that Esau is the real boss of the world, and therefore if you don't surrender to Esau, you might not exist. Here you're completely mistaken. Here you're completely out of touch with the truth of who Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. Esau is the garment through which God may be functioning now. But your true loyalty, your true essence is connected to God, who is the only master of the universe, the sole master and exclusive boss of the entire world. And this is expressed in the way Yaakov sends the gift to Esau. If you take a look in your source, the Torah says, Vayolan sham balayla hahu. Jacob dwelled there that night. Vayikach min abba biyadei min chala Esav achiv. And he took from what came into his hand a gift to Esau, his brother. What does it mean he took from what came into his hand a gift to Esau, his brother? Obviously, you take from what comes into your hand a gift to Esau. What does the Torah mean with this? So Rashi gives a few interpretations, and one of them is Davar Acher min haba biyadei min hachulin shenotol ma'aseh k'modat Omar asir asenolach v'hader lokach mincha. Fascinating interpretation, Rashi says. Yaakov took what came into his hand min hachulin, from the mundane. First, he gave tithes. First, he took from his possessions and he gave a percentage for charity. Afterwards, what was left in his hand from the chulin, not that which is not holy, that which was not designated for a holy cause, from Meiser, from that he gave a gift to Esau. Granted, why is the verse mentioning this? Why is that relevant here? But one of the powerful interpretations is that Jacob was communicating a very powerful message. In the Jewish life, individually and collectively, there's two dimensions. There's chulin and there's kachim. There's the mundane aspects of life, and then there are the sacred aspects of life. Jacob will give Esau a gift. Min haba biyadei min hachulin, avaloi min hakachim. When it comes to giving away sheep, he'll give sheep. He'll give goats. He'll give camels. He'll give, as Rashi says, diamonds and gems. He'll share his economic produce with Esau. He has no problem with that. But v'loi min hakachim, but the sacred part of his life, when it comes to his faith, when it comes to how to educate his children, when it comes to Shabbos, when it comes to kashrus, when it comes to family integrity and purity, that he's not going to sell and give away to Esau. He's not going to say, since I have to bribe my brother Esau, therefore I'm going to give away my soul, my kachim, my sacred inner space. My flock I'll give you. Some of my diamonds I'll give you. I'm living under the government of Esau, Adoni Esau, or in that case, I want to make peace with Esau, I'll give it to Esau. But who Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav? Esau doesn't own the world. Esau doesn't represent real reality. I don't belong, my essence doesn't belong to Esau. My essence belongs to the core of Esau, to the source of Esau. The source of Esau is God. Right now, God wants me to work through nature. Nature is now Esau. I'll do it with Esau. I'll do it through Esau. And this is the meaning of a very interesting concept, a very interesting expression. When Esau meets his brother, look at the next source. How does the Torah describe it? V'hu avar lifneim. And he passed before them. He, Jacob, passed before his family, and he bowed down 7 times until he came to his brother. And then Esau ran to him, and he embraced him, and he fell on his neck, and he kissed him, and he wept. The expression is, V'hu avar lifneim. Here you have also V'hu. Who's the V'hu? So one of the great Hasidic masters explains, this is the Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. That's the Hu in that Midrash from Esther. V'hu avar lifneim. The Hu of God passed before them, before Jacob and Esau, and that's when Jacob bows down to Esau. When he bows down to Esau, he's not bowing down to Esau because Esau becomes his God. V'hu avar lifneim, the Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz mishpatav. And that's why it says in Zohar, how can Jacob bow down to Esau, who represents idolatry? Because Jacob sensed the divine presence was there, and he bowed down to the divine presence. He wasn't bowing down to Esau because he believed in Esau. He bowed down to Esau because he understood that at this moment, the will of God is that he must engage Esau and cultivate Esau and be friendly with Esau and diplomatic with Esau, but never sell his soul to Esau and really believe that Esau is the one who's going to give him his future and his identity and his destiny. I want to conclude the class with a personal reflection. Last Shabbos, 2 days ago, a very close friend of mine for many years passed away. His name was Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Deitch. He was 34 years old. He suffered from lung cancer and many other complications for 3 years. He was the ambassador of Chabad to Tyson's Corner in Virginia for a number of years, together with his wife, may she be well, Miriam, and their 4 children, where they built a beautiful, extraordinary Jewish community, created a Jewish Renaissance. And after a very heavy battle of 3 years, Levi returned his soul to its maker Shabbos afternoon at 2:15 p.m. He fought till the last moment like a lion. I have no other way to describe it. And although immediately after his diagnosis, medical experts shared with him that he has very little time, he fought and he lived for 3 years. A few days before Levi passed away, I traveled to visit him in the hospital. And although he was quite ill, very ill at the time, his mind was completely alert, sharp, humorous, and we actually sat all day and schmoozed and chatted and had a great time together. Levi's love for life was extraordinary. He loved people. He loved life. He had what we call a simchas hachayim, a zest for life. He embraced every day with gusto and with passion. And even lying there on the bed, such a short time before he passed away, his passion and his celebration of life has not abated. And at some point, he explained to me how he's feeling and what he's feeling. And he shared the following idea, that the way he sees his illness is the way he sees all of natural phenomena. It's a manifestation and it's a garment of God. The world is God's world. Every single moment, the divine energy is recreating the world and every single person and blowing life into every single creature. Natural phenomenon on all its levels is merely a divine manifestation concealed within the laws of nature. So although there are doctors and there are physicians and there are hospitals and there are medicines and there are predictions, it's essentially God acting through the vehicles and the instruments of nature. And therefore, the same God who brought the illness could also bring his recovery. Because ultimately, it's a spiritual reality and there's godliness at the core of every event and every experience and every encounter. The illness as well as the recovery. Because nature and miracles are essentially one. Listening to him, I saw vividly what the Midrash was saying here. There are many who's in the world. There are many powerful forces in the world. But there's one who, the Midrash says, that is greater than all the other who's. And that's the Hu Hashem Elokeinu B'chol ha'aretz mishpatav. That day, I experienced the greatest and deepest and humblest lesson of what it means to celebrate life and also what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be Yaakov. What is the secret? What is the life? What is the perspective of a Jew? Good night.
Was nur Rebbe, Esau, was bin Heint Camels, Neus Jesch, Vayishlach, Arba'im, Babelayim, Kasrayim, Parsayim. Was denn muss mir sagen? Als wir reden werden angerufen, Bo, Bonim, Lamo, Ko.